This episode was originally a live webinar hosted back in June 2024.
Friend of mine, entrepreneur, he did once, he was like, okay, let's increase prices. He increased prices by 60% from one year to the other, informed all customers, and his strategy was very simple. We increase price by 60%, and everyone who comes back, we say, sorry, it was a mistake. We increase it only by 20.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Silvan.
Happy Tuesday and very well welcome to this live stream today that we're hosting with three superb guests. I'm going to properly introduce them in the first questions that I'm going to ask to each and single one of them. Great to have you here, guys. Thank you for your time. I'm going to jump in right with the first question to you, Lars. You're the CCO at Yokoy, probably one of the most well-known scale-ups here in Switzerland. Your co-founder, Melanie, recently stepped down from her operational role as CMO, but you stuck around. You changed your role. You grew over 5 years now, if I'm not wrong. What are you still excited about achieving at Yokoy?
I think the beautiful thing about getting a scale up and what still gives me the motivation to stick around is really the constant change. It's something that really fuels me. And I mean, if I look in the market, so my view that I always have also when I invest in companies is I always want to see like, what is the total addressable market and how much have we achieved already? And I think for us, you know, the beautiful thing is we still haven't we have only scratched the surface. So there's still so much to do. So that makes me very, 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 very excited, right? And the constant change. So it never gets boring. It's always exciting to start the next quarter with new challenges. And yeah, that is what keeps me motivated.
I love that. It's like still the beginner's mindset. It feels still like a bit like day one in that sense. So you on the other side, you're the co-founder and CEO of Sherpany. You're well known for the meeting management solution that you put in place, but you also recently got acquired by DataSite earlier this year. Can you tell us a bit more about that exit journey and what also still keeps you at Sherpany? Because I know it's not the earnout.
That's correct. There is no earnout. Well, I could answer that question with 2 hours or like 2 minutes. How much time do I get?
It's a short intro, so we keep it sweet and short.
Well, the journey has been super interesting. We got an inbound request last summer, had a couple of rounds, and then started a process out of it in November. And then it took us 4 months from basically outreach till signing mid-February. So it was quite dense. And I always had the mindset, you cannot sell a company. A company gets bought, right? And then acquisition happens when it comes up. It's an opportunity, but you have to be ready at any point in time. And we have been ready, and that really helped to go through it in that short amount of period. And for us, a key learning was that we kept competitive situation until the very last day, till the moment we actually put the ink on the paper. And that gave us obviously leverage, but also made sure that we kept everyone going, avoided deal fatigue. But the best thing about it, it's just like an absolutely crazy adrenaline rush for like 2 or 3 months. And I felt like super pumped, every day ready to go. My mom was like, you never looked as shit as in that period. But I didn't feel that way. And so that was a very good experience. After that, I was 3 weeks sick. So she was right at the end of the day, like moms always are.
Exactly. I think that sort of screams to do an additional Swisspreneur podcast episode with you to talk about the exit story on its own. But today we want to, of course, talk about sales and also introduce Laurent here to the stage. You don't really need an introduction, Laurent. You know, you have been the co-CEO and CFO at Holy Code, former CEO at Bexio, founder of Mobile with a successful exit. The list goes on, but you also invest in startups yourself between all the operational activities. So does being and having been a founder make you also a better investor, or maybe even a worse investor in that sense?
I would say definitely a worse investor. No, I mean, my track record as an investor is really not great, but that can change any day. You need one or two that really work out well, and then it's different. But I think, at least from my point of view, maybe the others see it differently. Most entrepreneurs are somewhat optimistic to the point of naive, because why would you otherwise start such a crazy journey, right? And whenever I get approached by people, this comes up in me again, right? I'm not good at holding back my emotional optimism and jumping on it and saying what you do is great and let's do this and I want to invest. Where a good investor would probably stay much more rational, look at all the surrounding risks and what needs to be done. And yeah, I don't think I'm made for investing, right? I'm made for building stuff with people
we get
together.
excited too quickly.
Yeah, 100% second that.
That's the founder's game. You have to be a relentless optimist. So today I want to talk to you about scaling your sales organization. And Lars, I put you on the big screen because the first question goes to you. Let's say we hit 1 million in ARR. What other KPIs should be accompanying this milestone if your growth is holistic, so to speak? So you not only look at ARR, what else do you look at?
Yeah, I did some investments recently, and some of my companies, knocking on wood, had a crazy growth and they achieved that milestone. We were exactly talking about that. Like, what are the other milestones besides from AR that you want to track from that milestone on? Because I think, by, every milestone, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, 20, 50, the KPIs, they change, right? Or you have new KPIs that you will want to look at. And I think one of the most important KPIs to track early on from 1 million, I think is you should really look at the AE efficiency. I see this more and more becoming a big topic, because what you will see when you look at it is that probably you have one or two AEs that are bringing 80, 90% even of your revenue, which is something you need to work on, right? You need to make your sales process repeatable so you can add more AEs, have more revenue. So you don't want to have this hit by just like two people in your organization. I think you have to really look at the average deal size, making sure that one goes up. I mean, depending on your ICP, obviously. I think the sales cycle is something very important to look at when you're at 1 million, because these are all KPIs you need to have set up right in order to make your process scalable, right? And be able to do, an accurate forecast on where you will be in a year, in 2 years' time, right? So these are the ones that I, advise to look at in more detail. And I assume that even if you're already at 1 million, you know exactly, your win rate and everything. That is something you should already do from the very start. If you didn't do, then also look at your win rate, because that is what will tell you. The win rate and the average deal size will tell you how much business you will need, how much pipeline you will need to hit your targets. And from there on, with your AE efficiency, you can calculate exactly how many AEs you will need, right? If you can keep the quality of your AEs. And that's why the efficiency is so important, because it doesn't count if you have two AEs bringing 90% of your revenue. And I think we all know this. If you have these, you cannot clone them, right? It's good to have them, but you need to crack the code to be able to hire very plain vanilla standard AE and make this person successful too.
This episode was sponsored by Property, the leading real estate agent for all real estate transactions with a comprehensive ecosystem. They combine highly trained experts with the latest technologies on an intelligent platform to provide clients, brokers, and service partners with risk-free, flexible, and simplified services. Learn more at property.com. That's property with an I.com. I want to talk a bit more about the three things that you just mentioned, because I think this is super interesting. You go into way more details than you probably did before hitting this 1 million ARR. So the account executive's efficiency, how can you improve that? If you have these two superstars bringing 80, 90% of your revenue, you cannot clone them. So where do you change something?
Shortly to add, because So this 1 million ARR sticks a lot in the heads around, but it really depends how many deals it is. If you close 3 deals to get 100 million ARR, you're definitely not ready to scale. So 1 million is not necessarily the one number that really makes you, oh, now I'm getting into sales traction. So really that like the number of deals, look at the diversity of how is that bucket of 1 million set? Is it highly diverse? You're less likely to scale. If it's highly compounding or like similar, all the deals look sort of similar, you can start understanding what might be the secret source behind that is sort of a playbook to move forward. And that's sort of what I would always advise, like really take that time and pay attention to what is that 1 million actually.
Which ICPs are you really going after, right? I think, Lars, in your case, if I'm not mistaken, it's mainly bigger accounts, 250 employees or more, right? So that's probably one segment. But I remember my brother is in the management of Salesforce Switzerland, and they have like AIs that are going for the really small business up to 50. Then they have a segment 50 to 200, and they have a segment 200 to 1,200. So also the size of your clients that you're going after can very much change the approach and the sort of personnel that you need in that, right?
No, I agree. I agree. I think that the question from Silvan is really about, when you do this transition really from like a very heavy founder-led sales to really scaling your organization. I agree. I think that number is different for every SaaS company. I think for most, it's the 1 million mark, because that is really when and I agree with you, by the way, what you said, To, like if you have closed 3 deals, we cannot talk about product market fit, right? It's too early. So it depends on some factors. But let's say you have crossed that milestone, like 1 million or whatever it is, and you want to scale your sales organization. What I found out is that actually the people you hire first that will help you achieving that is a completely different profile than the A's you will hire later on, right? Because your first people are super entrepreneurial. And when I think back, like of the early days, when I had Marcus, he's the country manager of Switzerland now for Yokai, it was like we were just like focusing on getting business in, right? It didn't matter, like this hierarchical levels, and we were just like focused on getting the first 1 million, because we knew that is what we need in order to scale, right? And it will be better for everyone in the company when we get there. So I think it is, to your question, Silvan, what needs to happen is change of role needs to happen, right? I think the worst thing that can happen, if you look at AE efficiency, is when you as the founder or as the founding team are competing against your own AEs. I think that is the absolute worst. It's so toxic, right? So if you have your own quota as founder, and you have your A's that have their own quota, and of course you will be much better because you're the founder, and that it's a conflict of interest. Even I would say for me it's a red flag. So also when I invest in companies, I want to make sure that does not happen. And then what changes too is you need to work out a playbook. Someone else said playbook before. I think that is the the main job that you will have from that milestone to your next one, is how to create this playbook in order. And I always take the example of the plain vanilla AE. You take this guy or lady from any company that has like 3 years experience, like solid AE, and now you bring this person into your company. How do I make this person successful? So it starts with you need to have product trainings, you need to have sales trainings. So there's a lot, adding to your normal tasks that you had before, right? So we started to run really like deal reviews. We started to do training sessions where we went through a call, and we really built this L&D organization to really invest in those AEs, right? And yeah, that's how the role changes, right? And to your first question, what makes me still excited here at Yoko, it's exactly that, right? Because you have this constant change, right? And now it's not only about me closing a deal or me helping and one AE to close a deal. It's really about how can we scale and how can we make this really big, right? And the next challenge we have now is it's not only talking about AEs, right? Now we talk also about reseller, right? So you have external people that you need to treat like your internal people. So there's so many cool things you can do really to scale that. So yeah, I hope this was helpful.
One point that I want to add where I agree with Lars is it is this efficiency in the beginning is the secret source to efficiency is magic. like as a founder-led sales, you put that little magic to your sales process that somehow makes the deal happen. And this needs to be replaced by, you would say in Swiss German, flies, like your most outperforming sales are suddenly not going to be the ones that have magic, but it's going to be the ones that are like highly effective in their daily activities. And they can, over time, they will outrun you as founder, but it needs a complete different mindset versus, as long as you look for people that can put that little magic onto it, that plain vanilla AE will not succeed.
Yeah. I mean, if I look at the first 1 million we did, and that is what can't happen after that anymore. We also promised features, and we built stuff that was only relevant for one client, right? Stuff you really, really, really want to avoid, right? And like the AE you get, the plain vanilla AE I always mention, should not like promise features, for example, time tracking, because we're a spend management tool. We don't do time tracking, right? And that happened in the past, right? So I think that is also, a very important point when you look at the performance, because you play with different cards, right? You're the founder. You can say, okay, we're gonna push this feature forward, right? And in the future you want to also have a scalable product, right?
100%. I love the additions here. Thank you, To and Lars, for sharing that. One second point you mentioned, Lars, was increasing the annual contract value. I think another very important step. How do you do that? Do you just go for bigger deals with bigger companies, or what other tactics do you have in place? And I'm sure Laurent and To also have something to add after your take.
Yeah, I'll make it very short because I'm sure they both have very good points as well. It's sometimes it's not going up market. It's not the best thing for everyone, right? It really depends on where your ICP is, right? So I think it's, many things you want to. So if you have different modules that you sell, you want to try to combine them as much as possible. So really go in with a high ticket. But again, right, it can also be that you have a very good land and expand strategy. So I would not say there is like one rule that fits for all. It depends a bit. I think what is very important for us SaaS companies, and what we really, really need to do, all of us, is because we put a lot of effort in developing our product. The product gets better for SaaS always, right? So there is a natural way of also growing your prices because the product gets better, right? And it should also be that the early adopters that you have, that they should be incentivized by being an early adopter of your product, right? So they have a lower price. And I think that is really important because, at some point, because clients talk, obviously, you might have to argument why client A has a lower price than client B. And I think, someone that, has been with your company since your first year, of course, has a better price, right? They also took the bigger risk.
Anything you want to add, Laurent and To, to that?
Yeah, one point that it's not a complete answer. It's just an additional point. There was an entrepreneur 10 years ago that told me, look, Laurent, you should never discount your price, because it's just, you're basically saying you're overcharging your client. You should always add more value. Super simply said, very hard to be done, but I still find that to be true. So what we always try is to add additional value for free that we can then afterwards use to grow and extend the modules or the base of that customer over the next 6 to 12 months, because we're not just giving him the same thing for less money. We're actually giving him more value that hopefully will make him more happy, so he will buy more in the future. So it's really this mindset of giving more for the same rather than giving the same for less.
So I think there's also a story that you can share with the comfy cookies and Rivella drinks in the office.
Yeah. So while I fully agree on a paper or ideological point with Laurent, I found it hard when it comes to scaling and having that plain vanilla AE to train them and have that mindset of adding value. And from my experience, it is less efficient to do that than being clever about discounting policies. It is easier to trade value on discounts, and because that's something they naturally can do easier than adding value, especially when it comes to scaling. I think when you have like 3, 4, 5, 10 AEs, it's still possible. When you have 20, 30, 40, it's getting way harder. Ideologically, I fully agree with it. In execution, from my experience, it stops working or starts breaking at some point. I think on the growing the deal size, I think there Lars, you made one very important point, which is like, think about your land and expand strategy. What does it actually mean growing your deal size? And it's not necessarily true that you need to grow your land size or your land deal. It can also be different. And one of our key learning, which we made way too late, is like looking at that very specifically for each individual market. It can even be different for the German part of Switzerland compared to the French part of Switzerland. For example, in Italy, we completely changed our strategy by landing way smaller. We built a very specific land package to be highly competitive, but we built in a price increase strategy of increasing prices by 15% every year. So after 3 years, we are back at our average deal size where we want to be, but we made a very specific land strategy for Italy because there we had competitive price pressure versus in Germany where we don't have it. So it really depends on like individual markets. And so doubling down on that, think about your land and expand strategy very specifically per market. And we are tendentially, that's from my experience, tendentially we are over bullish on landing, which makes landing just harder. And we are under bullish on expanding. We can grow very strongly once we land it. And it obviously depends on your retention rate, and you need to keep logo retention in mind. But a colleague of or a friend of mine, entrepreneur, he did once, like he was like, okay, let's increase prices. He increased prices by 60% from one year to the other, informed all customers, and his strategy was very simple. We increase price by 60%, and everyone who comes back, we say, sorry, it was a mistake. We increase it only by 20. And he lost only 2% of his customers through this maneuver. Very simple strategy, but it worked.
I think what is very important, if you look at, and maybe it goes again to what we discussed about before, but I think if you look at your average deal size, you need to also look at the other KPIs. For example, your sales cycle, because if your average deal size goes up by 200%, but your sales cycle goes up by 400%, you're clearly doing something wrong, right? So there is no simple answer to this. But again, that's what makes our job so exciting, no?
Yeah, but I think what was super important on that is really like if your average deal size overall of your customer is very close to your land deal size, then there is something off in your land and expand strategy.
Very good point. Yeah, I take a note of that myself. I think that's a very good thing to focus on. Laurent, I want to continue with you. When we grow our sales, usually then it's also time to hire additional team members. And in that sense, and I think you have a personal learning and story to share here, we often think, where should I hire first? Should I hire more marketing people to then feed my salespeople? Or should I hire more salespeople to then generate more revenue and then hire the marketing people? So what comes first, the marketing or the sales hire?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, that's now from the discussion we now had, it's probably coming back a step, right? That's your first couple of hires that you're doing. And at that point, what we did was that was now for Holy Code. In other companies, we did it a bit differently, but it was also a different business. But we first hired salespeople in 2 different markets because I felt this is the go-to-market strategy here is you need to have people on the ground. They need to actually build a network. You need to build that up slowly, which to a certain extent I still believe is true. But what we figured out is, just going to events and doing your cold outreach by yourself in this industry is too hard. It simply doesn't work. You need to have lead magnets first. Okay, so we should have actually built a marketing team first that has enough lead magnets so that we have leads we can then afterwards convert and work on, right? So from that perspective, in our case, it was the wrong decision. We should have first gone with building a small marketing unit that can actually attract enough clients and that we as founders could probably still have worked up somehow, and then only started building the sales team. We went the other way, which in hindsight was not the right strategy, but also the nice part about it was once the growth came through the marketing team, we had salespeople that were really truly into our system already. There was no need to look at it anymore. They knew exactly what they were doing. So there was an investment upfront that was maybe a bit too much. But I think I touched already on that. The first one or two sales hires you will do after the founder-led sales, they're not going to be your standard AEs, basically, right? You're going to have, as you said, someone very entrepreneurial that can still replicate this founder sales magic somehow, maybe also promising a little bit too much from time to time, but it will be people that are really entrepreneurial, have this magic with themselves. And then once you have those one or two people, that's when you're probably going to start looking at the more repeatable sales reps and building up the right processes for them to actually be able to do that. If you hire those too early, they're really going to fail massively, because from a founders-led, magic-led sales to I want to have a very structured process and a repeatable business, that's just too big of a gap to usually bridge with the first one or two hires. So in general, I would say, unless you really have a good, well-filled pipeline, start with marketing, then hire one or two entrepreneurial sales, and then start getting into repeatable sales hires. I don't know if Lars or Toby see it differently.
Yes and no, but you want to go first?
Go, I don't mind.
I think the push for marketing can't be too early, right? Because you want to test things out, right? So I totally agree with you. And Melanie did a great job in our very, very early days, because people taught us like this, the expense robot. Back then we were called expense robot everywhere. What I see, the beauty about getting salespeople in early, or these entrepreneurial profile of salespeople in early, is it will really, really help you to test your messaging, to test your product market fit. Because if you do the outbound game, you can really sense, like, is the market really waiting for your product or not, right? And I'm a big believer anyways in B2B SaaS. And again, it depends a bit on your ideal customer profile and the industry you're selling to, and so on and so on. But I think there is a lot of magic to be made by a strong outbound-led sales team, right? And you can really find out a lot also about your messaging, about the industry you go after, about your ICP, because you will have conversations, right? And at the very beginning, these conversations is what really helps you to get to the next level of your product, your messaging, and so on.
Thank you, Lars. You said what I wanted to push on. Outbound. If I would have to prioritize, I think marketing is a function, or the importance of marketing, I think, is a function of like ICP and deal size. Like the more B2B enterprise sales you go, the less important marketing is at the end of the day. Because I think when you go up market, or when you go more B2B enterprise, what we tendentially overestimate is the amount of people we have to talk to, because it's not millions of people that we usually have to talk to. It's a couple of 10,000, and a couple of 10,000 people that you actually need to talk to get your funnel filled is way more effective or you can do with face-to-face, and face-to-face or person-to-person is more effective than like a widespread marketing. So marketing can, when it's B2B enterprise or B2B SaaS, I think it can help significantly in the sense of keeping the logo, the brand top of mind within that specific target persona area you are. But to get conversations going, I think with outbound, you're highly effective. And I fully second what Lars said. Like the speed on how you can learn by doing outbound yourself, having SDRs, doing outbound, listening into their calls, learning from what works, what doesn't work. It's like way faster.
And it's your job as a founder. You need to do it. You need to talk to many people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You as a founder need to do that. If you start giving this out to your first sales reps and you're not doing it anymore, I think that's the biggest mistake you can do. I mean, they need to also do it, but as long as you should be doing that yourself, because you will learn so much from those discussions. And I agree that the go-to-market shifts if you go up market, right? Fully agree with you guys. But let's look at an example like Vexio. Also there, sure, outbound, doing these talks is very important. But there, the rate of learning you can do through the marketing-based, web-based traffic that you get on the website relatively soon gets you much more data back, right? So I think we have to really distinguish between go-to-market for relatively small priced solutions versus highly priced solutions. I think those are two.
And you know what? I never invest in these small B2B startups that sell to very small tickets to very small organizations or even individuals. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening in like e-commerce. And I met some people also at the Swiss Economic Forum. And the reason why I do not invest is I cannot help them, right? Because marketing is not, I don't have any knowledge of it. And so what Tol said is basically, in short, what I said in like 3 minutes. The more enterprise you go, so the more you sell to larger organizations, the more important your outbound game is, right? Because you will learn so much. But I agree, if you sell to like individuals that run, like for example, a small online web shop, outbound is it's going to be super tough, right? And you might you might be super unsuccessful when reaching out to them because no one wants to take a call with you. They would only do that if they really want to help you build your company, right? So I agree on that. And with every question, it depends on like who are you selling to.
You said the contract value, Lars. What is too small for you? Below what number per year?
For me to invest in, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's more about the ICP that companies are going after. I don't have a number on contract value, but as soon as it goes into like a B2B sales motion that is similar to B2C, I'm out because I can't help, right? But if I look back at the early days of Expensorbot, we were, and back to the question we had before, we were selling or we were outbounding to like all of the companies, to small ones, middle ones, different industries, because we wanted to have these conversations and we wanted to find out like where do we fit in exactly. And if I look back, I think that exercise was really what helped us nail down very early our sales process and which companies we go after. And the earlier you can crack that nut, the earlier you can really start scaling.
So I also want to talk about the hiring process. So we heard how important outbound is, but I also hear many Swiss startups struggling to find good salespeople. What channels worked well for you? Where did you find good salespeople that you then hired and who also delivered in terms of performance?
I cannot answer that question because there's not one channel that I found as a silver bullet working. Definitely LinkedIn is a good channel to get in touch. I think there's two key things that I learned. Number one, it's start hiring way earlier in your head than you plan to on paper, because hiring happens in your head. It starts with thinking about it, building relations. And then the best channel is you yourself as an entrepreneur or as the CEO or as the person who is leading or building up that sales organization. Like you can outsource and it helps, but at the end of the day, the earlier you put in your head that you have to shift your focus from doing magic to close deals to doing magic to get talents, the earlier you will be able to actually hire relevant people and building those networks. I mean, I think that's something we have done too late, but then continuously overinvesting in building relations. We have been building relations with sellers from our competitors over years to be ready when the moment they are ready to move, you're ready to get them on board. And as you grow momentum and as you become more painful for others in the market, sellers are going to look for the winning company and they will start moving, and you will not get them on day one, but you should start investing time on day one to talk to them, to build those relations and to get a feeling, because you will make wrong hires. And the earlier you build a lot of relations, a lot of momentum, it's like doing sales, right? You get a lot of no's, you don't close many deals, but you learn a lot. And it's exactly the same with sales. Like the best talents, they will not come. You're not going to hire the best ones in the beginning. Maybe one because you know him or lucky, but usually you don't. So you have to learn which ones are actually the good ones and then learn and fail and so on, and continue closing great people and trying to up hire. And ideally you see it, right? After 3 years, the best one that you had 3 years later is on the low end. And then you did something right.
I love that. Lars, you wanted to add anything to that?
No, I was just so excited about what Tol said, and I wanted to underline this. No, I think that you speak to so many candidates, and even though you cannot hire them at this stage or at this time that you're in, you need to keep them close, right? And you need to reconnect. And by the way, that is what great recruiters do. The best recruiters out there in the market, they keep the candidates close. They do check-ins. They go for coffee. They want to understand, like, what is their vision in life? Where do they want to get to? So I think that is a very important task for us as well, especially when we hire our leadership teams. And then what you said before, so I think it's not only the founders, but really the founders, the employees, the early employees, the investors, the board, right, to really help with making introductions, because I agree that is one of the best sources and low-hanging fruits, because we invested so much money in recruiters. And it even happened to us that we hired people where we found out later that they had personal connections to people that worked in our company, right? The recruiter did the intro. We had the first call. We found out, oh my God, this is a great fit. We want to go further in the interview process. And then, it came up, hey, I heard that you had an interview with this guy. He's a good friend of mine. Like, we should really get him on board. And you're like, dude, why didn't you tell me before, right? We pay 20% commission to a recruiter. So I think it's super important to always highlight that in the organization. Like, what are you looking for? Make a bonus plan, incentivize people who bring great people. And what I learned here at Yoko is that great employees bring great employees. That, if you have a good employee, they will always refer someone good to you. And you should always look at these candidates, right? And then, I was actually hoping that Toll brings now his secret stash on great candidates, so I can source from there too. But I was wrong. He just gave the same fuzzy answer that I would have given too. But I still think, at some point you need to work with recruiters too, because, you need exactly to have these people that have very strategic connections to these candidates, because it's something that is, built over time. And you need to really understand, like, what is the big vision of a candidate? Like, where do they want to get to in their in life, basically? Like, what are the goals that they want to achieve? And then, the company stage needs to fit in that part where they are in life.
I really like this personal link to the vision of the candidate to show them where they want to go personally and how the company can play a role in that. I think that's really important. Laurent, when we look at the sources that we now discussed, first network, then as you grow, probably also recruiters to work with, you still have to take the interviews with the salespeople to then decide who eventually you want to hire. How did that sales process look like for you when you hired the salespeople you mentioned before?
Lars and Toll can probably say more about how you hire, big account executive teams on the sales side. For me, ones that we were usually hiring were more on the lower end of the go-to-market, really like more marketing, product-led driven sales teams, where a lot of the sales actually comes inbound, and you just really have to make sure that you get them from the freemium to the premium model. So the way that we used to do that, a good source for that was always, and it's crazy to say that, but health insurance companies in Switzerland, at least, like they have very strong outbound sales teams that are used to calling 100 people, 200 people every morning, every afternoon, and just running after that script and doing what you told them, knowing that it's a numbers game for them.
Everyday people.
Yeah. And then really biting once they have someone. So those kind of people were the one that we were looking for. But then you had to make sure in the interview process that they're structured, right? Because there's a lot of people that work in this structure, but they're actually very unstructured. And in a startup, you don't have these big corporate structures where every button and everything is in the right place and everything works exactly the way that it's supposed to be. So yeah, I'm not going to say you need to do 3 interview steps with this person and then have a screening session with the sales lead or whatever. I think every company has a bit different there, but you definitely need to check for cultural fit. As Lars also said before, if a reference comes, that usually makes it much easier. And then I think, especially on the lower end of the sales market, it's a lot about having people that cannot just only express themselves well, but are really, really structured, because it's a numbers game and they will drop 5% of the deals just because they forgot to follow up, or because the system that they have is not working the way that you're supposed to. And those two things together can make a very big difference in the mid to long term. But yeah, I'm not going to go into details of how many interviews you should do. I think that's very different for every different company.
Fair, yeah. There's also a book that got recommended to us by Ross Mason, the founder of MuleSoft, Hire with Your Head. He said that was a really good book that helped him to walk through the interview stage and the whole hiring process. So highly recommended if anyone wants to do a deep dive in that sense. Toll, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think two things. One thing is funny that was like also a realization I had way too late. Was that we were like looking exactly the same, like AVD people or like people that have like high turnover sales, and saw that as a good source to, or a good place to source candidates from. And only later I actually asked myself the question, but why? Why do they have good people? And the reason is like their sales enablement programs are just outstanding. So we should not just look at that as a source for people, but it's actually a very, very inspirational source to understand how to properly do sales enablement and how much they invest into sales enablement, because they get their candidates from somewhere, like super diverse backgrounds, and they manage to put them through an enablement program and just make great sellers out of them. So that was for me, yeah, realization I had way too late to look into those companies.
Yeah, you can make salespeople successful if you don't have that right. You can hire the best AE in the market, and you have to enable the people right. So I agree. And that's why, right? You need to have these conversations by yourself at the beginning to be able to give that knowledge to the people that you'll hire.
And I don't know how that works for you guys, but my experience in terms of duration of sales staying in their job, especially in these, very high volume intense jobs that I usually had, it was always super difficult to get the core of the team to stay in the job for more than 2, 3, 4 years, because they were getting very good at it very quickly, because hopefully you have a good sales enablement process, right? So they started getting really good at it. And then after 2 years, they're like, yeah, but what else can we take on? And then one way of helping them usually was to find, because we were at that point, was to have different ICPs or a different segment that they could go into to keep them for another year or so. But at some point, they always transitioned out of it. And I think that's something you have to be aware of. You need to hire a lot more salespeople in your career than you first think you will be ending up hiring. Just because of that, a lot of them will spin up and out of the current position.
Yeah, and it's also because you have a lot of excitement waves, right? But for me, and that's why I said it before, actually, understanding what is the vision of someone, right? Because if you understand that, it will help you to know a bit, like, is it only for a short gig, or is someone really wants to stay for some years? But I mean, this is also, you can do we invested also in leadership program for our leaders to exactly prevent that, right? Because if that happens, you're going to spend like a lot of money. It's so expensive to hire someone, and it's even more expensive if you have to replace. Sorry, I think I cut you off before.
No, with the risk of being here the purpose party pooper, but it's like with this, with vision in life and purpose and so on. I mean, I was 100% subscribed to that and was investing a lot of time. But I learned it's like there are companies that just figure it out. And if you look at that, like banks or Salesforce or others, it's very simple. Take people that are at the end of their 20s, beginning 30s, make them earn money, make them buy a house, and they're financially locked in. They just cannot move away. Make them addicted, and they stay. And it's
the money trap,
because it's a trap. Absolutely, but it's a trap that scales. And finding the vision, or finding enough people that sort of align their life vision with your company vision, I had a very hard time.
But that's on us. That's on us, too. It's on us, though. But it's really, you need to find out, like, are they planning to build family? Do they want to buy a house? Like, I think it's important to know these things. I don't want to go into too much detail. We can have...
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. But these kind of things are super valuable when you find those elements, and then you can sort of, over a scalable element, which is at the end of the day money, help them succeed in what they want to do when it comes to that. But if it's, I want to save the planet, well, you're not going to do that.
No, I agree. And the pain always is, these things change over time. It's not that, like, your vision in 2019 is the same as 2022, for example, right?
So we never managed to keep people sort of coming out of university or 2-3 years of experience in their like early 20s or mid 20s. keep them longer as 3 years. It was only people that sort of got to a certain level of they settled in their life, which was like where you can then provide a more stable in terms of, okay, we provide you money, we provide you a good environment, you're generally happy at your job with the up and downs and so on, as we all know in sales. But around there, we found a sweeter spot to actually be able to keep people longer. But the other thing is, coming back to what we said before, you just need a powerful enablement program. You need to be able to turn over 30% of your sales team every year and still keep it growing.
I have two last topics I want to get into with you. The first one I think is a very, very important one and closely linked to what you just said, To, the sales compensation structure. And I want to start with Lars and then let you, Laurent, and To add to that. But how do you structure the sales compensation? How much fixed salary versus variable salary? How do you structure everything? What is your best practice there, Lars?
I mean, we changed it also when growing the company. My best practice advice is to do we can talk about equity too, but now from the cash side, have a 50-50 split or try to come as close as possible to a 50-50 split of fixed and variable salary. And then have the equity on top as upside, basically. The equity should be the upside, right? The equity is the 1 million you get out, like when there is a crazy good exit event, right? And I think that also helps, getting people on board and getting people stick to the company, right? Because there's this big upside opportunity. But to get good people and to retain good people, you need to have a good compensation structure. I agree what To said. They need to earn money, right? Otherwise, they can go to Salesforce, they can go to HubSpot, where they will earn good money, right? So if they're successful, they need to earn good money, and that's why we transitioned to the 50-50 split, right?
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, how much commission do you give on software sales? If they bring in new recurring revenue, how much commission do you give to the sales reps? And do they also participate in any renewal after they initially closed the deal?
So this is the same since ever at Sherpany, 12% on any recurring revenue that is signed within the first 12 months of the contract. If they sign a 100K deal, it's 12K that they get in that respective month. If that customer grows within the first 12 months to 500K, they get another 48K on top of it.
Got it. But no renewal in that sense. That is then customer success, I assume.
That's correct. Like the expansion part, growing then the account over time, we have within the account management in that sense is part of our customer success function.
Fantastic.
It sounds pretty simple how you describe it. 50-50 split, 12% revenue.
Simple is always good for commission, eh? It's always good.
That.
If you have, to be a mathematician to calculate, then you do something wrong.
I think one just asterisk to this is, I fully agree with what you just said. Depending on the sales cycles you have, you need to have a good plan on how you bring in the salespeople. Like if it's a 50-50% split, right? You cannot do that from day one if it takes them 6 months to start closing their first deals. So you need to have sort of a grace period or a ramp up period. Exactly. That's something you need to have in mind, because the best salespeople will not join you without that. No chance.
No, I agree on that. You need to have that in place, right? It needs to be fair. So, yeah.
And To, over to you for the second part here. Once you hire a salesperson, you have the compensation in place. Of course, this depends heavily on your sales cycle, but how fast do you start or expect to see results from them?
As mentioned, it depends super, super strongly on your sales cycle. But I think to me, at least, there were always early indicators. It's like, can they really build up their own pipe? Do they pick up the phone? Do they have like meaningful conversations? Are they hungry enough to get proper opportunities? Are they qualifying well? These are all things you can see within, let's say, the first month or two. I've never seen someone outperforming and starting off with a weak pipe. The first 3 months not building a strong pipe, but then suddenly months 4, 5, 6, it all jumps. And we had people that were like, "Yeah, I have a very strong network. I'm working on that. Blah 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 blah." never happened, So you need to get those opportunities. You need to have meaningful qualification calls. You need to have meaningful discoveries. You need to have meaningful showcases and demos and going in and having conversation and so on. And this you can see. So in that sense, I think you can see within the first 3 months, after 3 months, you can see whether someone is going to perform or is not going to perform. How well, this will take time, right? So depending on your sales cycle and how fast this can be, we made good experience by having a very rigid success framework, which is like, what are the KPIs that need to be in place after 3 months, after 6 months, after 9 months? And usually you get 1 quarter grace at Sherpany. If your KPIs are off, then we together with that person, we make a success plan very specifically down to really activities or account lists, or lead lists. How do you manage to build up your funnel? And if after a second quarter it's not possible, then it's not going to work. And waiting longer is not going to help anyone, because it doesn't matter whose fault is it. Is it the candidate? Is it the environment? Is it the market? Is it the people he needs? We have great salespeople, but with our specific target persona, they just didn't click. Well, if they don't click, you cannot change it.
There's always excuses.
You cannot change it. So whatever, either it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, end fast, because it's a great opportunity for that person to move on and find another place where he can be successful. Doesn't help anyone to stay around if you cannot be successful. You're just going to be frustrated and have negative impact on the team.
It's for us 100% the same, too. 100% the same what you just said.
It's
so funny.
2 quarters, basically. So half a year. That's the time where you really need to see improvement if they are not on track, and then you cut the losses, basically.
And I think if you have 1 quarter time to improve and come up with a plan. I mean, we do the same. For us, it's like To said, the difference is we let the sales professional do the plan on his or her own. I think it's really important. If you're not performing well, you need to be able to come up with a plan. If you already fail at coming up with a plan, you don't need to hang on for another quarter, right? I think, and it's for us all, right? We all entrepreneurs, we know, like, if something is not working out, we need to come up with a plan, because we need, to get other people on board for our plans. I think that is a very important one. But yeah, I think, everyone can have a bad quarter. You can have bad luck, right? But the great ones will come up with a plan, and they know what they need to do in order to get that right. And what To said before, I mean, there are indicators. In the end, it's a very simple game. Activities drive pipeline drives revenue. If you're lacking revenue and you're also lacking activities and pipeline, then, it's not going to work out, right?
And revenue drives commission.
Exactly.
And commission drives happiness.
Yeah, exactly. It's so simple. We could probably go on for another hour. But
can I put one in? Sorry, it's a very because I want to give this to the people that listen to it. We invented President's Club, and it's such a good tool. Really, like, take the people to a cool place. Reward them and reward their partners as well, right? Because they spend a lot of time at work, and that helped for us a lot. We went to Dubai this year with the best performing individuals, and it was really an amazing trip.
How do you do that? Is it just like a fixed percentage where you say the top 5% or whatsoever get
There's
in there,
some
or
rules
how do you
to it.
measure?
You need to hit quota and overperform by X. And the good effect that you get is that the partners will also support more the individuals that they can go on the club trip next year to. Right? It's like a free vacation you get. So, and it's funny too, because we got that inspiration also from AVD and those companies, because they do this so well, like Spiffs and President's Club and so on. It's a really cool thing to get more stickiness.
Amazing. I want to wrap up the conversation today, because we're almost out of time, with some quick rapid fire questions to each and single one of you. I'm going to start with Laurent. How do you balance short-term sales targets with long-term growth? Just try to keep it with 1 or 2 sentences if possible.
Oof, that's my inner struggle. I'm probably too much on long-term growth. I'm too soft, I would say. That's why I put a lot of emphasis on my co-founders to run with the team after the short-term sales goals, because I would just be too soft and always say, we'll find a solution next month and we're on the right track. So for my My solution to it is have a co-founder that is more strict on it.
Got it. So what is one sales strategy that always works for you?
If you find the career enhancing move for the decision makers on the other side and the champions, you close the deal.
I love that. And Lars, how do you keep your sales team motivated during tough quarters when they're not hitting quota? How do you keep them motivated?
I'll keep this one short. I think the most important thing to do is to roll back your sleeves and not only win together, but also lose together. So I think it's very important to show that you're a great leader in these tough quarters and be there with them. And, if needed, you pick up the phone as well and start dialing and, support them. I think it really comes down to great leadership when you're having a tough quarter.
Sales Playbook is Switzerland's #1 B2B sales and HubSpot agency for fast-growing entrepreneurs to increase pipeline, revenue, and sales efficiency through all-bound pipeline generation, sales enablement, and HubSpot services. Their 300-plus clients include Beekeeper, Bexio, Boostbar, and Brame, who have already achieved go-to-market transformations, such as scaling from 0 to 10 million ARR in 3 years, quadrupling their higher sales velocity, and reducing by 50% their sales customer acquisition costs after working hands-on with Sales Playbook. Go to thesalesplaybook.com to learn more. And Laurent, what is the one most important trait that you look for in a salesperson or even sales leader in that sense?
Empathy. The more they understand what the other person wants and needs, the faster they will figure out what to do.
And To, last one for you. Is there any moment where your sales team exceeded or really blew your mind by their performance?
Never happened. Never happened means
there's a big imagination.
Means either I have been hiring wrong, or I have been enabling wrong, or I have too high expectations, or a combination of the three of them.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing that. Lars, the last one for you. You're now more of a manager of salespeople. Do you ever miss selling yourself?
I said it before, you win together, you lose together. And thanks God, there is a stage in the deal where I get involved as well, because still up to this day, I love managing people and everything that comes to it. But what I love most is really talking to prospects. And do it together with the team, right? I really love that.
Amazing. To, Lars, Laurent, thank you so much for your time today. I think people, they commented, they really enjoyed the conversation, found it useful. So thank you so much for your time and for all the insights you shared. I really appreciate it and wish you all the best and a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Silvan, for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so
Always
much.
a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.